For now, we want to turn to a local story here. This is kind of interesting, and I really want to know a little bit more about it because I'll be honest with you, I'm not very familiar with the tech community here just yet in terms of, the things that we've done and maybe the things that we are doing. But this is one story that I find to be interesting, and I want to learn a little bit more about it. Artificial intelligence now being used to develop drugs even faster and cheaper could save pharmaceutical companies to the tune of possibly $100 million annually. And for that, I want to bring on Scott Hopkins. He's an associate professor in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Waterloo. Scott, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Brandon.
So, Scott, first of all, tell me about this whole thing to begin with. Let's get into the nitty-gritty and the background of it.
So essentially what we're doing is pairing some of our experimental work that we do in my lab here along with some artificial intelligence. In a nutshell, we're taking single drug molecules and running really fast cycles of condensation and evaporation to condense water around them, make little droplets. And by monitoring that process and then applying some artificial intelligence algorithms, we can say something about how those drugs behave. And that includes things like how easily it dissolves in your blood, how quickly it passes through your cell membranes, stuff along those lines. So the fact that we can do this with picograms of drugs, so this is a millionth of a gram, and get all of these properties in minutes is actually a pretty big step forward in terms of screening drug candidates so that we can bring them forward to clinical trial much quicker.
Scott Hopkins, an associate professor at the Department of Chemistry at the University of Waterloo. Now, to my understanding here, you said that it could possibly save pharmaceutical companies, here at least according to the study, millions of dollars, or even to the tune of $100 million anyhow annually. How does it do that exactly?
Well, I wouldn't say $100 million annually. It's possible to save hundreds of millions in the grand scheme of things. So when a drug is being developed, it has to go through some very rigorous trials. And from concept of drug until it comes to market, you're probably looking in the range of 10 to 20 years usually. And during that timeline, initially we have tests of drug properties to see, if that drug is actually going to distribute in your body, right? So if you swallow a pill and it stays in your stomach and doesn't dissolve and get to where it needs to be, it's just going to be excreted and it has no impact on you at all. So for this first 7 years or so, the drug companies spend a lot of time basically looking at different variants of drug molecules, seeing what the properties of those molecules are, and when they have some candidate structures, they can then bring those forward to clinical trial, which again takes years and years and years of validation in order to prove that these things are safe and they're actually effective. So what we're doing is shortening that first stage, that first phase of the drug discovery process by taking these properties measurements very quickly with very little drug, and it doesn't have to be pure. As long as we can see some of the drug in the sample that we're running, we can actually extract all of the properties. So at the end of the day, if a drug takes $1 billion to develop over 10 years and we can cut 4 years out of the process, then that's $400 million savings. So that's just a rough estimate.
So, Scott, does this apply for any type of drug, or, is this only for maybe like an ingestible one, or maybe it's only for injectable drugs, or what kind of drug are we looking at here, or is this kind of a global outlook at it?
It's a very general process, so we can measure the properties of not only drugs, but any type of molecule this way, really. So at the end of the day, we have other possible applications in things like materials development, development of new sensors. There's maybe some interest in terms of pollution or in terms of the nuclear energy sector, things along these lines. So anywhere that you could use information with regard to how a molecule behaves under different conditions, then we're now a good way closer to being able to say something about that very quickly.
Scott Hopkins joining us this morning. He's the associate professor at the Department of Chemistry at the University of Waterloo. So at this point right now, Scott, how are we looking at the output of this? I mean, this is already being developed and sent out to, pharmaceutical companies for it to be, I guess, put to use, or, where are we at in terms of the stages of, I guess, in a sense, distributing this type of artificial intelligence?
So we've been working with two companies in the private sector. One is Pfizer. So these are the guys that make the little blue pill that help out hundreds of millions of people, right? And there's an instrument company by the name of SciEx. They're based out of Concord, Ontario, but they're actually an international company for building scientific instruments. And the three of us, so my group, Pfizer, and SciEx, all came together to work on this. We're now in process of creating a cloud-based service to be run through SciEx for doing exactly these types of measurements. So it's still sort of early stages here, but we're moving forward to commercializing this. We have a patent on the process. It's turned into a spin-off company here at Waterloo. So I co-founded a company by the name of Watermine Innovations a few months ago, and we're starting to ramp up our artificial intelligence there as well, so that we can start developing new drugs, coming up with new ideas for therapeutics.
Scott, I really appreciate you taking some time this morning to speak with us.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's Scott Hopkins. He is an associate professor at the Department of Chemistry at the University of Waterloo, developing AI that's being used to develop more drugs and, newer drugs so that we can get it done faster. Like he was saying, it takes 10 years sometimes for a drug to develop. And if we could shave 4 years off of that, absolutely. I think it's innovative, it's great, and it's good for the community. Puts us on the map.